Men of Iron, Chapter 7. So little does it take to make a body's reputation. That night, all the squire's quarters buzzed with the story of how the new boy, Falworth, had answered Sir James Lee to his face without fear, and had exchanged blows with him hand to hand. Walter Blunt himself was moved to some show of interest. "What said he to you, Falworth?" asked he. "He said naught," said Miles brusquely. "He only sought to show me how to recover from the undercut." "It is passing strange that he should take so much notice of you as to exchange blows with you with his own hand. Ye are either very quick, or parlous slow at arms." "It is quick that he is," said Guskin, speaking up in his friend's behalf. "For the second time that Falworth delivered the stroke, Sir James could not reach him to return. So I saw it with mine own eyes." But that very sterling independence that had brought Miles so creditably through his adventure was certain to embroil him with the rude, half-savage lads about him, some who, especially among the bachelors, were his superiors, as well in age as in skill and training. As said before, the bachelors had enforced from the younger boys a fagging sort of attendance on their various personal needs, and it was on this point that Miles first came to grief. As it chanced, several days passed before any demand was made upon him for service to the heads of the squirehood. But when that demand was made, the bachelors were very quick to see that the boy who was bold enough to speak up to Sir James Lee was not likely to be willing fag for them. "I tell you, Francis," he said, as Guskin and he talked over the matter one day, "I tell you I will never serve them. Prithee, what shame can be fouler than to do such menial service, saving for one rightful lord?" "Marry," quoth Guskin, "I reason not of shame at this or that. All I know is that others serve them who are as good and maybe better than I, and that if I do not serve them, I get knocked in the head therefore." "I judge not for you," said Miles. "Ye are used to these castle ways. But only I know that I will not serve them, though they be 30 against me, instead of 13. "Then you are a fool," said Guskin dryly. Now in this matter of service, there is one thing above all others that stirred Miles Falworth's ill liking. The winter before he had come to Delvin, Walter Blunt, who was somewhat of a sybarite in his way, and who had a repugnance to bathing in the general tank in the open armory court in frosty weather, had Dick Carpenter build a trough in the corner of the dormitory for the use of the bachelors, and every morning it was the duty of the younger squires to bring 3 pails of water to fill this private tank for the use of the head esquires. It was the sight of 2 of his fellow squires fetching and carrying this water that Miles disliked so heartily, and every morning his bile was stirred anew. "Sooner would I die than yield to such vile service," said he. He did not know how soon his protestations would be put to the test. One night, it was a week or 2 after Miles had come to Devlin, Blunt was called to attend the Earl at livery. The livery was the last meal of the day, and was served with great pomp and ceremony about 9 o'clock at night to the head of house as he lay in bed. Curfew had not yet rung, and the lads in the squire's quarters were still wrestling and sparring and romping boisterously in and out around the long row of rude cots in the great dormitory as they made ready for the night. 6 or 8 flaring links in wrought iron brackets that stood out from the wall threw a great ruddy glare through the barrack-like room, a light of all others to romp by. Miles and Guskin were engaged in defending the passageway between their 2 cots against the attack of 3 other lads. Miles held his sheepskin coverlet rolled up into a ball and balanced in his hand, ready for launching at the head of one of the others as soon as it should rise from behind the shelter of a cot. Just then Walter Blunt, dressed with more than usual care, passed by on his way to the Earl's house. He stopped for a moment and said, "Perhaps I will not be in until late tonight. Guskin, and ye and Falworth may fetch water tomorrow." Then he was gone. Miles stood staring after his retreating figure with eyes open and mouth agape, still holding the ball of sheepskin balanced in his hand. Guskin burst into helpless laugh at his blank, stupefied face. But the next moment he laid his hands on his friend's shoulder. "Miles," said he, "you'll not make trouble, will ye?" Miles made no answer. He flung down his sheepskin and sat gloomily down on the cot. "I said that I would sooner die than fetch water for them," said he. "Aye, aye," said Guskin, "but that was spoken in haste." Miles said nothing, but shook his head. But after all, circumstances shaped themselves. The next morning, when he rose up through the dark waters of sleep, it was to feel someone shaking him violently by the shoulder. "Come," cried Guskin, as Miles opened his eyes. "Come, time passes, and we are late." Miles, bewildered with his sudden awakening, and still fuddled with the fumes of sleep, huddled into his doublet and hose, hardly knowing what he was doing, tying a point here and a point there, and slipping his feet into his shoes. Then he hurried after Guskin, frowsy, half-dressed, and even yet only half awake. It was not until he was fairly out into the fresh air and saw Guskin filling the 3 leather buckets at the tank that he fully awakened to the fact that he was actually doing the hateful service for the bachelors which he had protested he would sooner die than render. The sun was just rising, gilding the crown of the Dogen Keep with a flame of ruddy light. Below, among the lesser buildings, the day was still grey and misty. Only an occasional noise broke the silence of the early morning. A cough from one of the rooms, the rattle of a pot or a pan stirred by some sleepy scullion, the clapping of a door or a shutter, and now and then the crowing of a cock back of the long row of stables, all sounding loud and startling in the fresh, dewy stillness. "Ye have betrayed me," said Miles harshly, breaking the silence at last. "I knew not what I was doing, or else I would never have come hither. Nevertheless, even though I be come, I will not carry the water for them." "So be it," said Guskin tartly. "If you cannot stomach it, let it be, and I'll carry all 3 myself. It will take me 2 journeys, but thank heaven I'm not so proud as to wish to get me hard knocks for naught." So saying, he picked up 2 of the buckets, and started away across the court for the dormitory. Then Miles, with a lowering face, snatched up the 3rd, and hurrying after, gave him his hand with the extra pail. So it was that he came to do service after all. "Why tarried ye so long?" said one of the old bachelors, roughly, as the 2 lads emptied the water into the wooden trough. He sat on the edge of the cot, blousy and untrussed, with his long hair tumbled and disordered. His dictatorial tone stung Miles to fury. "We tarried no longer than need be," answered he savagely. "Have we wings to fly with all at your bidding?" He spoke so loudly that all in the room heard him. The young squires who were dressing stared in blank amazement, and Blunt sat up suddenly in his cot. "Why, how now?" he cried. "Answer ye back your betters so pertly, sirrah? By my soul, I have a mind to crack your head with this clog for your unruly talk." He glared at Miles as he spoke, and Miles glared back again with good will. Matters would have come to a crisis, only that Guskin and Wilkes dragged their friend away before he had opportunity to answer. "An ill-conditioned knave as ever I did see," glowered Blunt, glaring at him. "Miles, Miles," said Guskin, almost despairingly, "why will ye breed such mischief for yourself? See ye not that ye have got the ill will of every one of the bachelors, from Walt Blunt to Robin de Ramsey?" "I cared not," said Miles, fiercely, recurring to his grievance. "Heard ye not how the dogs upbraided me before the whole room? That Blunt called me an ill-conditioned knave." "Marry," said Guskin, laughing, "and so ye are."